When I opened up my Zoom today to speak with Judith Beck, she had mentioned that she saw my swell about the Salamanca market in Tasmania. And I said, yeah. And she said, I live here. I had no idea that she was 17 hours ahead of me, let alone that she was right there where I was about 2 months ago. So it was so exciting. And we're going to talk with Judith Beck today, not about Tasmania, but about some really interesting stuff that she's an expert in. And I use the word expert because after decades of working in the area of banking and executive searching and finance, women in finance specifically, she has a lot of insight, and we're going to really dig into that in this conversation. This comes at a time also when Judith and her partners are going to launch their new podcast next week called Every Step. And it's going to help people really drop into conversations about corporate culture. They have so many great guests lined up. It's going to be amazing. And it's going to look at everything from startup mentality to leadership to everything in between. And we know that as you ascend the corporate ladder, you bump into some rungs that are pretty tough with spikes, and you got to figure out how to feel into that. But also, I asked about her book, No Sex at Work. And it's a pretty complicated conversation to parse out in a 5-minute piece like I'm doing now. So I'm just going to let you know that we're going to drop into some aspects of this book that are really going to be relevant to how to have truthful conversations with yourself and with others. Because her observations about gender and in work are very interesting. And I think that they might surprise you. So I'm really interested in how this unfolds, and I can't wait for your voice to be included here. So thank you for kind of dropping in with me. Judith, welcome to Swell, and I'm looking forward to hearing a lot of people in your life that meet you through every step to come over here and to have really invigorating conversations about what they're hearing on your podcast. So I'm happy our timing is so good. But I want to just drop in with the initial question about the connection you've made your entire career between the banking industry and corporate culture. We as lay people who don't know what banks look like and feel like, we are always engaged with them because everybody has a bank account. Can you talk a little bit about the corporate culture of banks? Because I know you worked at a bank and you work with women in finance, and now you really have an incredible roster of clients that are banks. So without full disclosure of those clients, can you talk about the culture of work at banks?
Hi, Deborah. That's a really good question. Banks, in my experience, were really good places to work. However, you know what? It depends on the leader. It always does. And, we can just see recent examples with organizations now when a new leader comes in, it can change the culture. So I would always encourage people to look at the major banks, but the most important thing is who's leading it and what do they stand for, because a culture can change very fast depending on who's leading it. And, banks aren't just for people who see themselves as financial, because they've got marketing, IT, human resources, and legal. And a lot of times people would go, I'm not going to work in a bank because I'm not financially focused. But there's so many different other areas that you can go into that would be very rewarding. Because one of the things I can say about large institutions like banks, especially, they have amazing programs. Like, they have put a lot of money into their programs for diversity and inclusion and women's groups and all kinds of things. And training and education. You really need to look into those areas. But I think first and foremost, giving advice to anybody who is looking at whether or not the banks have great cultures, is really you need to check out the culture, check out the turnover. And that's really easy to do, because all you have to do is go into places like LinkedIn and search people from certain banks, and you can really get a good idea if they have a high turnover. And if there's a high turnover, there's probably a pretty good reason for it, and it could be a red flag, or it could be they're going through a major change. So you need to do your research when you're looking at going into a banking institution or any other institution. And it could be a tech company as well, because I've done a lot of work with tech companies. And a lot of times people think, oh, I'm not an IT person. But they have marketing departments and human resources and all those areas as well. And tech's not going anywhere. And really, banks aren't going anywhere either. So from a long-term career point of view, it's probably not a bad journey to go into. But first and foremost, the main thing is when you're looking at cultures and look at the turnover of the staff within those organizations, and ask people who've worked there what the culture's like. That's the best way to get information from people who are living it, and see what their opinion is. Kind of like doing your reviews online of companies. So anyway, I hope that helped, and feel free to ask me any more questions. Thanks. Bye.
Judith, that does help. It's interesting. You're right. Every company has within their company, specialties that have nothing to do with what the company does, of course. I want to go back to, the title of this swell, and there's so much to unpack here around culture and taboos and what's appropriate and what's not. But we're going to stick into the financial world right now, the banking world, because it's so cloaked, I think, with myths. And I think we need to unpack some of those. But let's just talk about the elephant in the room, which is, the disparities of who's running banks versus who wants to run banks. I don't know the statistics of how many women are running banks versus how many men are running banks in terms of the C-suite. But one of the things you and I spoke about when we were preparing for this was, when does gender play a role in somebody's perspective on culture and whether or not they're feeling like there's a glass ceiling? And I know you have some challenges around that are going to lead to some more questions, but the challenge of somebody in a managerial position who wants to have difficult conversations about what she perceives as a glass ceiling, how would you advise her? So I'm going to do a role playing here. I'm a manager at a bank, and I've been there for 4 years, and I've seen people advance and I haven't. And my first question when I look in the mirror is there something wrong with me? Are my skill sets not appropriate? Am I a weak link? I'm doing my personal review. I'm going to get reviews from my peers and from my managers that are above me. But doing that, I still find that I'm not advancing. What advice do you give me to figure out what next rung on the ladder I can go up on? And where do you feel gender disparity fits in there as just a thing that is true from the stats of the world, that, we're still trying to bridge the gap between women and men who are in C-suites across all industries, but let's just stick with banking. How would you advise me to do an inventory, and then how would I move forward?
Hi, Deborah. Wow, there's a lot of questions there, and I'll try to answer. Well, first of all, gender disparity. The reason why, I believe, is because women don't have the advocates that the men have. They don't have the mentors. So the first thing I would say to you as the bank manager who's been there 4 years and hasn't advanced, how many advocates have you got? How many mentors have you got outside your current organization? Because the guys have a lot of them. And why is that important? Because you need people who you can ask questions about your career journey and what you're doing right, what you aren't. And not the people that are working in the organization with you right now, because they can be good mentors, but a real advocate is someone who is a fresh eye. And those are people who have experience in the industry that you're working in, and they're more senior than you, and they're outside your current organization, and they have no agenda. So when you ask them a question about what you should do or how should I handle this, they're going to give you a fresh eye answer, and that is really important. So the first thing I tell someone is get yourself an advocate, not just one. By the time you're in a management position, you should have anywhere from 7 to 12 people in your little team of advocates who you can access at any point in your career. And then I would do a self-audit, because if I'm not getting promoted and everybody else is, I got to look in the mirror at the end of the day. That's the first thing I'd do. I'd go, okay, let's do a self-audit. What are my achievements? What have I done in the last 12 months that warrants a promotion? Am I meeting my KPIs? So I need to make sure that that's first and foremost. And with your achievements, make sure other people aren't taking credit for it. So don't be the silent person who is not, saying what they have done and, acknowledge their achievements because they think, especially women too, because I hear this all the time, I don't want to be big noting. Well, if you don't tell people what you've done, who will? So you've got to make sure that you're the person who, be proud of your achievements. You don't have to be big noting to be passionate and to be confident about what you've done. So make sure that people know what you've done, especially your boss. So that usually happens at performance time when you're talking about all the things that you've done in the last 12 months. And then what are you doing over and above what's required? Because promotions usually come with people doing more than what they've been asked. So are you getting involved in projects? Are you mentoring people within your organization? And are you networking? And here's the most important thing is when a promotion comes up at the bank, are you putting your hand up for it or are you waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder? Because if you're waiting for someone to tap you on the shoulder, you're going to be waiting a long time because people don't get tapped on the shoulder very rarely. You need to make sure that you are applying for that promotion and putting it out there and letting them know. I've had women over the years, because as you know, I ran a women's association for many years, and those were women who were in C-suite, and they were waiting to be tapped on the shoulder. And the thing is, they wouldn't apply for positions outside their current division, especially because they felt they didn't tick enough boxes. And we did surveys on this, and I know you and I have talked about that before. And the reality is that a lot of women think that they need to tick 7 to 8 out of 10 boxes before they put their hand up. But in reality, many of the executives that I have worked with over the years at CEO level have said to me they hire at six boxes because they want someone who is going to move up the ladder and who's going to be challenged, not been there, done that, and they're going to get bored with it in 3 months. So if you don't tell your organization that you're interested in an opportunity, again, no one's going to do it for you. So raise your hand. Don't worry about how many boxes you tick. Let them tell you if you're not right, but quit telling yourself you're not right. So one of the things I would say to people is that you need to put yourself out there. You need to throw your hat in the ring for opportunities within your own organization and let them tell you they're not right, and then find out why. Those are the things that I would do that I've seen over the years. And but yeah, there's many, many more.
Hey, that's really good advice, especially the self-championing kind of vibe you need to adopt. Excuse the noise, by the way. I'm in an airport. So let's kind of drop into that because I know there's so many more angles to this. But since you brought up the idea of advocating for yourself and having a plan and making that plan known to others, can you give us a laundry list of ways to prepare yourself for those kinds of conversations? Because the topic of this swell is really about difficult conversations, and I think some people struggle with the very specific conversation you need to have with somebody where you say, I'm very interested in this position and I'd like to apply for it. And can you please tell me when it's going to be available, or is there a process I need to go through? I mean, these are very common things to talk about when I'm not in the hot seat, but are there tips to talking to people within your infrastructure, within your business unit, where you don't say, I'm not happy or I'm going to leave, but say I'm open to opportunity? Because I think some people are worried if they bring out too much of the sort of, not aggressive, but I mean, that's a horrible word, but some people will be perceived that way. If someone who has a real plan, it doesn't mean they're not happy, but they want to make sure people know that they're looking for advancement. But it's a very nuanced thing, unless, of course, there's an actual application process and something's come open and you know what to do. But there's a whole world between a vacated seat and being in a position where you want to be mobile and move up. Can you give us some guidance around those kinds of conversations, who to have them with, how to approach them, not getting beating yourself up for having, the desire to move forward, but not being worried about that you're coming off as someone who's not happy. So it's all those nuances which I want to lean into deeper, because I think that's really where this comes down to, like, why would somebody be quiet? Why would someone wait for someone else to toot their horn? You're right, we have to do it ourselves, but there's an art to that, I think, right? There's a process for that.
Everyone in their career at some stage or another are going to have this type of a difficult conversation about a new opportunity within the organization. We've all gone through it, and it takes practice. And you might stuff it up the first time, but that's all part of the learning experience, so don't worry about it. It's like doing a presentation. The first time you're horrible and you're standing behind the podium, and the next, 10 times after that, you're out in front and you're speaking with confidence. Same thing goes when you're going for internal positions. So let's not overthink it. The first thing I would say in preparing for these types of conversations is that keep all negative information out of the conversation. So you don't want to start talking about, well, I applied for this role because I don't get along with my manager, I'm not happy in that division, or there's some other big drama happening. They don't want to hear that. That's not the time to be bringing up those kind of things, if ever, to be frank. The one thing that you do want to do is you want to say, look, I've had a look at the position description, and it really sounds interesting, and it sounds challenging. And I really feel that this is a good next step in my career, and that's why I applied, and I'd really like to explore this further. That's what they want to hear. They want to hear people are moving for reasons of challenge, advancement, those types of things, not because they hate something else. So you need to think about your careers moving forward and forget about what's happened in the past. And it is hard. Like, I understand it, I get it, it's hard, but you really need to think about how you approach this type of conversation. And that is why I always say, so make sure you have a lot of mentors and advocates that are outside your current organization, because this is a perfect example of when someone is going for an internal role or even an external role, that they have somebody who is not too close to the organization, they're outside the organization, that they can run these things past, who can say, yeah, what have you got to lose? Go in there and have a chat with them and ask these types of questions. Because all of us who've gone through this a million times in our career, we've made mistakes, and we've bombed at these meetings, and then we learned the next time to do it another way. So listen to those people that have experience, because if you don't have to fall, why fall? You might as well get advice and some guidance from people who have already done it, and that will help you a long way in preparing for any of these types of meetings. And be open with them. Go in there. If they're talking about a role that is highly technical, and that your access to clients is limited and it's really analytical, and that is not you, because you're a person who wants to be out there with the clients, and you're not analytical, don't try to be something that you're not, because that will go against you. Because position descriptions, when you see them internally, they're pretty stock standard, some of them, and so they'll have everything on a position description. One of the things that, and we could probably get into this conversation at another time, is about finding out what is it that they want this person to achieve in the first 12 months. Those are always really good type of questions. But the one thing is, you got to have the conversation first. You're not going to get anywhere if you don't put your hand up. And the worst thing that can happen is they say, no, you're not right for the role. Well, don't walk away from that meeting unless you ask them, thanks for the consideration, but could you give me some feedback? to let me know what I would need for this type of role in the future. So, just be upfront and authentic. You've got nothing to lose.